You're sitting in your driveway with the engine off. Dinner ended 20 minutes ago, but you're still replaying it. You laughed a little too loud. You agreed with something you don't believe. There's a version of you that shows up around certain people. Your voice changes, your posture changes, even your opinions get quieter. It happens a dozen times a week, and nobody ever asks you to do it. You might assume it's them, someone intimidating, someone difficult. But here's the strange part. It happens around people you love too, which means it may not be about who they are at all, and it costs you something tonight. 10 extra minutes in a cold car, a conversation replayed instead of sleep, that odd flat feeling after an evening that was supposed to be good. This isn't fakeness. It isn't weakness either. Reading a room is a real skill, and you got good at it for a reason. There's emotional logic underneath this, even when it doesn't feel logical. So the real question isn't why certain people affect you, it's why a specific version of you arrives automatically before you decide anything. And whether you get any say in who walks into the room. Because for most people, this switching didn't start with anyone currently in their life. It began much earlier, in rooms you barely remember, long before you had any words for what you were doing. For some people, it may begin at a kitchen table. You learn to hear the front door and know the mood before anyone speaks. Then you decide, quietly, which version of you is safe to bring downstairs. Underneath it was something simple. You wanted to feel safe, liked, not like a burden. Adjusting yourself often felt like the price of staying close to people. And when you're young, closeness isn't optional. Here's what's easy to miss. Back then, it worked. Matching the room often meant fewer arguments, softer voices, more warmth. It was a reasonable answer to a real problem. At the time, someone, let's call her Maya, learned this at 12. She'd glance at her older sister's face before answering a simple question. Funnier if the face looked open, quieter if it didn't. For other people, the same habit can start somewhere completely different. Being the new kid halfway through a school year, or a friend group where one wrong opinion costs you a seat at the table. Nobody packs a skill like that away. It just shows up somewhere new. A first job, a partner's family, a crowded kitchen. Your body reads the room before you've decided anything at all. But the past isn't what keeps this running today. Something happens in real time in the first few seconds of every room you enter, and once you can see it, you can't quite unsee it. Picture a dimmer switch inside you. It's been there for years. It sets how much of you actually enters a room, how bright, how honest, how loud, and you almost never notice your own hand on the dial. Something turns it, usually something small. A certain tone of voice, a pause after you speak that lasts a second too long, or someone who fills a room the moment they walk in. Within about a second, your attention slides off what you think and onto what they might need from you. That shift happens before any conscious thought arrives. You don't choose it, you catch it later, if at all. Then comes the part you can actually see. You soften an opinion, you shorten a story, you agree a little faster than usual, or you mirror their energy back to them, whatever the room seems to want. And for a moment, it feels right. The room settles, they smile, the tension in your chest drops a level. Nothing went wrong, and part of you thinks, good, I handled that. That relief is what keeps the dial turning. Because it worked, the switch gets a little easier to move next time, until eventually it moves on its own before you've even parked the car. Here's the uncomfortable gift of seeing the loop. Once you know the dial exists, you start catching your hand on it. Not once in a while. In places you'd never have thought to look. It starts on your phone. You write a message in one voice, then rewrite the whole thing for someone else. Every edit makes it shorter, smaller, safer. Then you send it. At work, an idea leaves your mouth as a question. Does that make sense? Just a thought. Feel free to ignore me. And it only happens when one particular person is on the call. In the group chat, you match the joke. Same rhythm, same energy, a little louder than you actually feel. Then you reread your own message and wonder if that even sounded like you. Holiday table, same chairs, same questions. And somehow you slide back into a younger version of yourself. Answering in a voice you thought you'd outgrown 10 years ago, nobody notices. Maya is at her partner's family barbecue. Someone praises a movie she quietly disliked, and she hears herself agreeing in a lighter voice, a voice that isn't quite hers. She lets it go. Later, the couch. Everyone's gone home. The night was genuinely fun. And still, you feel oddly hollow, like you attended your own evening from a few feet away. Each of these looks like nothing. A softened sentence, a borrowed opinion, a tiny edit nobody sees. But month after month, small things stack, and they stack into something heavier. There's a pause outside every door. 20 seconds where you quietly decide who you're about to be. Now, picture that pause 400 times in 1 year. Like a path worn into one strip of carpet. Borrow enough opinions and your own start to feel unfamiliar. Small decisions get strangely hard. What to order, which movie you'd actually pick, not because you don't know, but because you stopped asking. Maya is at dinner with her closest friend. She's warm, she's present, she asks good questions and laughs at the right time. And nobody at that table learns she just had a brutal week. Some of the cost is invisible, because it never happened. The idea you didn't say out loud, the raise you didn't ask about, the friendship that stayed pleasant for 6 years and never got deeper. Then a quiet story starts forming about you. Maybe I just don't have much of a personality. Maybe I'm only ever the easy one. It isn't true, but it repeats often enough to feel true. And it's tiring in a way that never looks like work. Scanning faces all day, adjusting, checking, adjusting, again. So you come home drained from something you genuinely enjoyed and can't say why. Still, the heaviest cost might not be the pattern itself. It may be how badly this gets misread. By you and by everyone around you. Because the names people give this are almost always the wrong ones. Start with the label you probably hand yourself. I'm fake. I'm a chameleon. I don't have a real self. I just become whoever I'm with. That's a harsh sentence to carry around all day. Here's a fairer reading of the same behavior. There is a self in there. It's just a self that learned to lead with safety first, which is why it shows up loudest where rejection would sting most. The second label usually goes to the other person. He's controlling, she's intimidating, as if shrinking always proves someone else did something. It's a tidy explanation, and it isn't always accurate. Sometimes the other person genuinely did nothing at all. And sometimes they really did talk over you, or brush your opinion aside. Understanding your own pattern never excuses treatment that actually hurt. Then there's the belief that quietly does the most damage. Once I finally see it happening, I should be able to stop it. Right there. In the moment. That's the standard most people set for themselves. But understanding and controlling are two different skills. Watching the dial turn isn't the same as being able to hold it still. Awareness is a starting point, not an instant solution. Which raises a harder question. If knowing isn't enough, and trying isn't enough, what's actually holding this in place? Because something is, and it's stronger than most people expect. Tonight you decide on the drive over. You'll say what you actually think. 40 minutes in, you hear yourself agreeing again, in that lighter voice. That isn't weak willpower, it's something older and quieter than that. The adjusted version feels like home, even when it costs you. Familiar can feel safer than unknown, simply because you know how it ends. New feels like standing in a room with no exits marked. Then there's everything you don't say. Actually, I see it differently. 4 words, swallowed 100 times. Each one feeds the pattern, and the pressure has to go somewhere. It usually goes inward. Sometimes it's easier to skip the dinner entirely. Keep certain friendships light, reply later, stay busy that weekend. Avoiding works, and it quietly shrinks your life while proving the fear right. After enough years, it stops sounding like a behavior. Maya says it one night half joking, I'm just adaptable, that's who I am. Once something becomes who you are, it stops being up for review. And underneath all of it sits a question nobody says out loud. Who am I in that room if I stop adjusting? Would this relationship survive a version of me it has never met? That risk feels real. So the way forward probably isn't fighting the dial harder. You can't force your way into being someone you've never practiced being. But there's another angle. And it starts by seeing this whole thing differently. So, back to the question we opened with. That version of you may not be a false self at all. It may be an old setting, still running quietly on autopilot. And a setting is something you're allowed to notice. Here's the reframe that changes things. This is a skill, not a defect. You read people well, extremely well. It's just been pointed in one direction for a very long time. That can widen. The first step is smaller than you'd expect. You catch it while it's happening and name it quietly. The dial just moved? That's it. Noticing is the whole task for now. The second step is one true thing per conversation. One honest preference. One sentence you don't shrink before it leaves your mouth. Not a confrontation, just a small piece of you that stays. Real change looks unremarkable from the outside. A half second opens between the trigger and the adjusting. At first, you only notice it afterward. Later, you notice it while it happens. Patterns like this change slowly, through repetition, not decisions. Some weeks the dial won't move at all, and that's normal. And if it's causing serious distress, professional support can genuinely help. But here's what happens when that half second keeps repeating. Something bigger shifts, quietly, in the background. Not just how you act around people, but who you understand yourself to be. So, who actually walks into the room with you? The version that shows up was learned, and learned things aren't permanent. You don't get more say by forcing one fixed self. You get it by widening who's allowed in. Adapting is something you learned to do. It isn't who you are. And what was learned can be looked at again, slowly, without shame. That's not a personality transplant, it's an honest second look. Maya is at another family barbecue a year later. She still softens a little. That part hasn't disappeared, and maybe it won't. But she says she didn't love the movie. And the evening carries on just fine. Some things may return slowly without announcing themselves. Sleep that comes easier after a social night. Closeness that feels mutual. Small decisions made without running a private poll first. Almost everyone carries a slightly different self into different rooms. That's part of how people stay connected, not a flaw in you. And the younger version of you built this for a reason, worth some kindness. Which brings us back to that driveway. Engine off, the same conversation replaying in your head. It lands differently now because you can see the dial turning. That isn't proof you're fake, it's an old habit, caught. We become ourselves partly through the rooms we learned to read. The people we adjusted for. The versions we practiced until they felt automatic. And noticing it is where a freer version of you quietly begins. The goal was never one fixed personality that never bends. It's just having a little more say in which version of you shows up. So here's the question I'd love you to answer in the comments. Which person in your life do you feel most like yourself around? And what is it about them? If any of this felt familiar, a like or a subscribe helps more people find it.